Garrosh is Warchief, Varian is High King, and Azeroth is on the brink of war. Time, of course, to bring that conflict somewhere new and totally wreck the place. That is how we launched into Pandaria. It was amazing with Mop Remix seeing some players think, oh my god, I cannot believe I just mowed down all of those orcs. I feel bad and I'm angry. Yep, that happened, and to those of us who were there a decade ago, it was rather funny to see. Now, what Mists of Pandaria is one of World of Warcraft's most coherent and well-told stories. Of course, though, we went back there for a reason. Eternus, the infinite dragon who is best buds with the Bronze Flight. She lost her sister long ago and wanted to change the timeline to save her sister, but realized that her sister sacrificed her own life on her own terms. So she wants to go back and find out what we sacrificed, why we made the decisions that we made, even if we ended up spawning the Iron Horde and then kind of giving the Legion their key to Azeroth, which then kind of led to Battle for Azeroth and the whole jailer thing. Yeah, little bit of a mistake. Perhaps you should have kept those keys and used them to unlock today's sponsor. If you'd like to support our mission as well as get ad block, absolution, ad-free videos, early videos, and the Lore Walking podcast, and you can go to bellular.games. And of course, be sure to join the private members Discord after you've signed up, because that's where we all hang out for things. Thank you for your support, and with that said, were we the big bad? That really is the question here. I mean, who was the big bad? Was it the Shah? No, not really. They were more a force of nature. Was it the Mogu or their Zandalari allies? Again, no, it was us. We brought all of our bullshit to Pandaria. So let me set the scene for you. Thrall handed the Horde over to Garrosh Hellscream, and for him, that was right. It should be the son of Grom who would lead the Horde. If you don't know the story of Grom, man, one day we'll have to do that because it's a pretty damn good one. But in doing so, Thrall inadvertently set events into motion that would lead to the Horde civil war. Because Garrosh didn't represent the Darkspears, he didn't represent the Tauren, he only really cared about the Orcs. Karn, the leader of the Tauren at the time, challenged Garrosh to Mak-Garah, ritualized combat. Garrosh agreed, but as long as it was under the old rules. To the death. This is where things went rather wrong. The Grim Totems, who are, let's just say, rather bad Tauren, well, they poisoned Garrosh's blade, and that did mean that Karn died. And his death mattered because Karn and Thrall went all the way back to, of course, Warcraft 3. So with this older, respected symbol of what the Horde was dead, Garrosh now ruled with an iron fist. Across the ocean, though, things were different with the Alliance. Varian was crowned High King. Even the Night Elves were on board with that. The Alliance was profoundly stable. Throughout Cataclysm, they had expanded their borders. They had drawn battle lines across the known world. Garrosh felt hemmed in, and he resented years of compromise under Thrall. His elite Kor'kron fought a campaign towards Theramore, where Garrosh dropped a mana bomb. And in doing so, he destroyed the city, he eliminated the population, and much of the Alliance top brass. Jaina attempted to destroy Orgrimmar, but was stopped by Anduin. Up until then, a lot of big events had just happened in the background, but this time in MoP, we could play through the fall of Theramore in a scenario. It was the first time that had happened, and it was the pre-launch event of the expansion. So we saw Jaina's grief firsthand. And of course, when Dalaran was set up to be purged by her, we understood why she felt that way. Now, Garrosh commissioned a fleet to challenge the Alliance's naval superiority. His armada came across a group of ships in the South Seas. One of them was flying the royal flag of Stormwind. And if you have a royal on board, you don't take risks. So the quick-thinking Alliance turned south into what every sailor knew was an impenetrable mist. They took that risk, but as they went south, there were no mists, and that is because the mist cast by Emperor Xiao had been destroyed by Deathwing's Cataclysm. So, going where they had never gone before, they found a new continent, Pandaria. And both sides had completely different reactions. Garrosh saw opportunity and ordered an immediate invasion, while the Alliance sent Admiral Taylor and SI-7 to find whoever was on that royal ship. With that, the stage was set, and our conflict is essentially what escalated everything and caused untold havoc across the land. And that's why whenever Taranju told Lore Walker Cho that the biggest mistake the Pandaren had made was letting us in, he was absolutely right. Now, this is something that eventually we would make good on by the end of the expansion, but first, let's go and look at the consequences of our actions. Pandaria felt like an invasion, and every modern quest tool they had was implemented. Aerial dogfights, stronghold building and burning, mass slaughter. When we landed, we really felt like the vanguard of something that was about to change the land forever. It felt like a land grab. At the time, the Horde and the Alliance were absolute behemoths. They sent in their airships and their fleets to secure footholds, but it quickly turned more brutal than anybody could have imagined. So much so that hatred literally bubbled up as the Shah, these voidy creatures that ended up wrecking everyone's invasion plans and forcing us all deep into the Jade Forest. These were background antagonists manifest as the 7 Prime Shah. Each one was a remnant of the old god Yesharaj, whose heart had been buried somewhere, and what they would do is amplify negative emotions, and that of course put a new perspective on all of the factional bloodletting. Yes, we all hated each other, and that's exactly what the Shah rely on. The Pandaren had built their entire society around denying the Shah what feeds them, but of course, they got to gorge on us. Anytime the factions were at it, there would be bemused Pandaren looking on, like Kang Bramblefist, him having to save Veldrin and his Night Elves after they just blundered their way into an arcane trap. Even then, the elves were looking for a way to restore their immortality, of course, while Kang goes around punching Mogu so hard their ancestors could feel it. Throughout the continent, the stupidity of war continued. The Alliance ended up meeting and arming the Jinyu. The Horde met the Hosen. They raided deep into Alliance territory. Meanwhile, SI-7 was hot on the heels of the lost royal codenamed the White Pawn, who of course turned out to be Anduin Wrynn. But he slipped their net and escaped deeper into Pandaria, seeking the healing properties of somewhere called the Vale of Eternal Blossoms. All of this stuff was burning away, and we just landed in the first zone. But the immediate context felt natural even for something entirely new. Everything came to a head at the jade statue of Yulon, the August Celestial. It wasn't just a statue, though. Nothing in Pandaria was just an object. Everything was special, mystical. Every statue was once a Mogu warrior or Jade, accursed Pandaren. Yulon was old and needed to cycle into a new body, so we helped gather the final Jade needed with our very own hands. Yet even as we would do a thoughtful, helpful thing, our factions were at it again. The Alliance and the Horde marshaled their forces to the statue, and all of that hatred manifested the Shah of Doubt. A little bit like how Selesh was born in 40k, but with a few less orgies. Now this was the moment that hope died on Pandaria. It was our fault, and the Shah were a physical representation of that. We knew now, anytime anger took over, the Shah of anger would appear. And so down went the statue. Now, plenty of plot would happen. Us players, our characters, we would go to the likes of the Valley of the Four Winds, we would get to know all of the locals, help the Shadowpan, man the wall, fight the Mantid, do all these fantastic things. But when the plot really kicked up again was patch 5.1, and stuff got really serious. Okay, we gotta deal with the Purge of Dalaran. So, the Alliance and the Horde made landfall with their main invasion fleets, and the race to capture the Vale was on. Both sides wanted the Divine Bell, an artifact created by the Mogu in their madness to try and control the Shah. Garrosh, of course, thought that he could use this to create Shah Voidy-infused super soldiers. Probably a bad idea, but totally the sort of thing Garrosh would think he could handle. Anduin, though, was on hand with the Harmonic Mallet, the exact thing needed to stop Garrosh, but Garrosh just crashed the bell down around Anduin, injuring him almost mortally, and he just turned around and continued the conquest of the continent. Soon after, the Alliance found the Divine Bell. They brought it to Darnassus, and then, shock horror, it was stolen. And that raised a question: how the hell did the Horde get to Darnassus? Well, by using a Sunreaver portal. Of course, the Sunreavers being the Horde-aligned faction within the Kirin Tor. Of course, Aethys Sunreaver would tell you otherwise, but for Jaina, this was all proof that they were working for the Horde. And that is when we were brought to a phased version of Dalaran to unleash hell on the Sunreavers, running down innocent elves in the street. And yes, some players in Remix would see Jaina do that and think, oh my god, that, is this World of Warcraft? But again, think about the context of the franchise. Warcraft was very much about war. These factions fought a hell of a lot. we saw the faction conflict escalate and escalate through Wrath of the Lich King, through Cataclysm. Of course, Jaina lost many people that she cared about in Theramore. Literally people she had spent years with in a city that she had founded. The likes of, say, Varisa, well, she lost her husband. It was an absolute disaster, a collapse, a unforgivable crime by the Horde, and that is why whenever circumstances allowed a little bit of twisting to happen, people's emotions were ready to pour forth, and that is why Dalaran was purged. This is one of those situations where nobody won. As an example, it was a disaster for alliance politicking because, well, the Blood Elves were actually considering joining the alliance. You see, a whole bunch of really bad things that happened. Garrosh very clearly tried to assassinate Vol'jin. That was playable for players via scenario. And with all of this going on, Lor'themar realized, hang on, the orcs have gone bad, the Tauren's leader has been killed, they've just poisoned Vol'jin, I think we should leave. Of course, that was immediately put down whenever Jaina went and killed a whole bunch of Blood Elves. For anyone who cared about peace, it was an absolute catastrophe, and with this event happening, it really did seem like war was the only way forward, the only possible course of action. But of course, other things had went on in Pandaria, so let's leave this plotline and visit those. Pandaria has so many factions. As an example, the Tillers. They just gave us a chance to unwind, pick up some vegetables, and do that sort of thing in the Valley of the Four Winds. But the further to the west we went, the more Shadowpan we found. These bunch were an order of monks, and the closest thing that Pandaria had to a standing army. They basically manned the Serpent Shrine wall, and beyond that wall, two zones that set up the threat of the Mantid, fanatical servants of the old gods who generationally attack Pandaria, dying in their tens of thousands, but always coming back stronger next time. Now, their cycle was thrown into chaos when the Sha'afir possessed the Mantid Queen, and completely terrified, she launched their final Doomstack invasion early. In the Talon Steppe, the Mantid were swarming in larger numbers than normal, but it's only when we got to their homeland, the Dread Wastes, that we realized the magnitude of the threat. Deeper still were the Klaxi. Now, the Klaxi are an interesting bunch. They're Mantid who realized that the Sha'afir would drive their race to extinction. Now, they still held their old allegiances to the old gods, but they helped us break into the Heart of Fear and slay the Mantid Queen. Then, the Sha'afir fled to the Vale of Eternal Blossoms, where, of course, at the end of the expansion's initial raid tier, we put it down. Over in Kunlai, the Alliance and the Horde lobbied the White Tiger for entrance to the Vale of Eternal Blossoms. But we weren't the only ones, and we weren't the only newcomers to Pandaria, because a Zandalari warfleet was scouted off to the north coast. You see, thousands of years ago, their once great empire was allied with another great empire, one of Pandaria, the Mogu. We discovered that these once Titan servants had gone rogue and built a brutal slave empire off the back of the Pandaren, Hosen, Jinyu, and Yangol. Now, they had dreams of resurrecting their greatest tyrant, Lei Shen, the Thunder King, and the Zandalari were of course there to help. So, to head them off, we invaded their stronghold of Mogushan Palace, and we discovered the titanic truth of the Mogu in the vaults beneath. We even discovered that the Mogu managed to bend a Constellar Elgalon to their will. Constellars essentially are servants to the Titans, at least it seems like that, and after meeting Elgalon, the end boss of Ulduar, this kind of blew minds. But anyway, the Zandalari had actually already excavated Lei Shen's body from the Valley of Emperors, and they used their most twisted voodoo to resurrect him. He then gathered the Mogu clans of Pandaria at the Isle of Thunder and planned his reconquest. The Isle of Thunder patch trailer recapped this story, setting the tone for the expansion's most relentless raids. But still, looking at these guys, the Mantid were just another old god race to smash, and the Thunder King had nothing on the crazy that we brought with us. But what they did do is they grounded some massive cosmic scale lore. So let's have a chat about how Azeroth became a world soul. Agents of somebody known as the Black Prince had been spotted throughout Pandaria, literally even in the first settlement that we visited. But of course, Cataclysm rogues knew exactly who they worked for, and that is the new Master of Ravenholt, Wrathion. After Anduin's clash with Garrosh, he recovered in the Tavern of the Mists, and that is when Anduin and Rathian would meet. They formed a solid friendship, and they debated solutions to the biggest problems of the day. But Rathian was always having the most off-the-wall destructive ideas, like maybe it wasn't so bad for the Alliance to just wipe out the Horde and kill everybody, because at least then the planet would be unified. And of course, the same went the other way. Anyway, Rathian rather spookily had access to quite a lot of power, and we ended up forming a bit of a relationship with him. And during that, when we were mid-invasion of the Thunder Isle, he asked us for the heart of Lei Shen. And this led to some of the biggest lore put into the game yet. A Titan Keeper Ra, created the Mogu, but he was actually the first to realize when the Titans had died, whenever Sargeras defeated all of them at Nihilum. And he found that out when Aman'Thul's soul slowly wandered its way to Azeroth and went into Ra, and with this he lost hope and basically deactivated. Lei Shen then accused him of abandoning the Titans' mission, and therefore Lei Shen took the power and said he would do it himself. So he took Raden's heart, he took his power and the remnants of Aman'Thul's soul for himself. Of course, cut to thousands of years later, and we end up killing Lei Shen. We carve out his heart and we give it to Rathian, who eats it, naturally. And when he did, something massive happened. The remnants of Aman'Thul projected through Rathian, saying that they had failed and that they need to rebuild the final Titan. That lore, that the Titans had died to Sargeras and that Aman'Thul saw Azeroth as the only thing that could save their mission, that is what would put us on the path to the current World Soul Saga. I mean, quite literally from the words the final Titan to the expansion the last Titan. Then, and it may have felt like major, albeit background lore, it was also the moment where Rathian realized something was really out to get us. The Legion, of course, and all of those thought experiments that he had about engineering one faction to win, those suddenly disappeared. He realized he needed one force to fight the Legion, and he basically thought Garrosh was the only person mad enough to actually do it. And so with massive ideas like this in Rathian's head, that the Legion basically were coming to get us, that all intensified the angle that he was playing, that one faction needed to win. That's why he kept on giving the player all of this power. It's why during the Landfall campaign, he basically said, hey player, how committed are you to this whole faction war thing? Could you go and kill a bunch of other people from the other faction? So throughout, Rathian essentially was playing both sides, waiting until one side would eventually win. And so with that set up, let's chart our course to the end of this expansion and some of the biggest lore moments that had happened in the game. As the expansion went on, things increasingly just got worse and worse for the Horde. As an example, Vol'jin got poisoned, almost certainly an assassination attempt by Garrosh. That happened. And all of this got to the stage where Lor'themar basically wanted to take the Blood Elves out of the Horde. It was all a hell of a lot of chaos. As the expansion would go on, Lor'themar would find himself stuck on the Isle of Thunder, right? So he was there, Jaina was there, and they were basically both trying to deal with the Thunder King problem, but they kind of also really wanted to kill each other. It was a storyline that, at least in terms of the faction stuff, was all about dealing with the fact that the Dalaran Purge had happened. So, Lor'themar was on the Isle of Thunder. Then, Garrosh started rounding up the Darkspear and the Tauren. He was actually rounding up the populations, and because of that, Vol'jin launched a rebellion. The Alliance decided to, of course, support that rebellion, and this led to an entire campaign in and around the Barrens, essentially with us taking the fight to the Kor'kron, who, of course, were the very, very loyal orcs to Garrosh. We killed commanders, we raided supply lines, that kind of thing. We fought a military campaign. And this was a campaign against Norgrimmar very different to the original one. Obviously, Garrosh had augmented the whole city with metal. It was far more militarized. The Kor'kron were using loads of new technology that eventually would be given to the Iron Horde. Things like those spinning bombs that came off goblin production lines. But all of that tech was far from the worst that Garrosh had planned. The heart of Y'Shaarj. The heart of Y'Shaarj, the source of the Shah itself, had been found. The whole expansion Anduin was banging on about the pools of the Vale of Eternal Blossoms giving life, and Garrosh knew what it would do to the heart. So he claimed the heart, he destroyed the Vale, and he brought the heart to Orgrimmar. And hearing its evil call, many Mantid followed, the very Mantid that helped us unseat their queen just a few months earlier. And the scene was then set for one of the ultimate showdowns in Azeroth's history, in the game's history. Pandaria was forgotten about because we were firmly back to cycles of hatred. The Siege of Orgrimmar was a gigantic raid, and we all know how it ended. Garrosh was defeated. He was purged of the Shah, and he was put in chains. In a last nod to the meta arc of Pandaria, Varian chose peace instead of war, realizing that he could have ended the entire Horde's leadership there and then. He decided no, that would be the wrong thing to do, and so he let them live. That was the end of the expansion, but it was not the end of our journey. And that's because, going back to Pandaria for Eternus, there was one more and rather massive lesson to be learned, and that is in the Timeless Isle. The Timeless Isle occasionally appears off the coast of Pandaria. The Bronze Dragons had an agent on hand, Kairos Dormu, and he wanted us to help him power up an artifact that he had created. It was this hourglass called a Vision of Time, and the reason why cuts to all of those debates that Anduin and Rathian had. Rathian was always about extreme solutions, like, as an example, letting one faction totally dominate the other so that there was a unified front against whatever would come at Azeroth. But the problem he was working on at the time needed a bigger solution. He knew that something humongous was coming for Azeroth. He felt the Legion's approach, and he felt that nobody was really doing anything about it. And then, whenever Varian decided to just let the Horde live, Anduin was furious, because that meant that his plan had failed. But of course, for somebody like Rathian, plans reside within plans. Along with Kairos, he hatched a plan to break Garrosh out of Alliance chains, transport him back to just before Gul'dan corrupted the Horde, and then have Garrosh forge a new Horde, an Iron Horde, one bolstered with the technology that had been developed under Garrosh's regime. And with that Iron Horde, they would use another time portal, they would go back to another Draenor, and they would repeat the process. Rathian wanted to essentially create an infinite army of infinite hordes to destroy the Legion. Obviously, who knows if this breaks the rules of time or space or any of those things that Rathian would have been far too arrogant to even try to understand. And how he planned to do it was with Kairos Dormu's Hourglass of Time, the very thing that we powered up. You can call Rathian's plan short-sighted, that we never needed the Iron Horde, but as of today, Azeroth is safe, and it may not have gone that way. For Kairos Dormu, things were bad. Garrosh just killed him as soon as they traveled back to alternate Draenor. That probably damaged Rathian's plan, but as he died, he screamed, "We will be limited by nothing, not even time. The possibilities are infinite. I will become infinite." Which I don't think is what Eternus is here to learn. I think it's that sometimes we make the hardest decisions for the best reasons. They just don't always pan out. I hope you enjoyed today's video. We have got way more long-form lore in the oven. Till then, though, if you'd like to support the show, you can check out today's sponsor, the link down below. With that said, though, if you would like some more lore, we have published a whole bunch, and I think you'll enjoy this one next.